Right here, I have France. I'm going to split it into two distinct territories. In the north, I put 99 men and 1 woman. And in the south, I put 99 women and 1 man. Who's going to win? For those in the back who missed biology, if I put 99 women and 1 man, it's because, for civilization to continue, we need both women and men for children to be born. We're going to call the lone woman Gertrude, and we're going to call the lone man Rocco. No, we're going to call the lone man Jean-Charles. Note that I made sure that the 2 people alone have traits that favor reproduction. Jean-Charles is fertile, he has boosted vitality, a longevity trait, an immunity trait, and a trait that makes him good looking. And it's the same for Gertrude. Honestly, I'm really curious to see what will happen, so I'm going to click play. From there, the first thing that happens is that kingdoms are formed. Notably, the first kingdom to form is the kingdom of women. We have 100 women right here. Well, 99 women and 1 man. And on their side, the men, there are 90 of them. Well, actually, there really are 100, but it's just that not all of them have entered the kingdom yet. They also seem to be taking their best nap, the bros. I'm not sure what's happening, but I'll rename this man. The question is, since not everyone is part of men's civilization, statistics show there's actually a woman involved. And what's funny is that there's already a couple. If I look here in family, for now, I don't have any family, so I don't know who the lucky guy is who managed to pair up with the only woman in the kingdom. I could have also renamed this the Smurf Kingdom, you know? I'll let these 2 kingdoms develop for 500 years, then remove the wall between them. We're only in year 7, and interesting things are already happening. So I don't know why it says, hey, I know, yeah, what the fuck. But the first thing we notice is that in the women's kingdom, we've gone from 100 women to 102 women. And if I look specifically in the family tab, we can see that we have our first family that was created between Jean-Charles and Barina, and together they managed to have 2 children. I think they're simply twins, and they're both 1 year old, and the positive thing on top of that is that they're both boys. This creates a complex situation, as by the time they're old enough to have children, the other women in the kingdom will be 40, which could be an issue. For now though, the kingdom of women has a slight lead. On their side, the men have already started to split up. We have 90 men on this side and 5 on that side. So logically, if we look at the statistics of the second kingdom, look, we have 5 men and 0 women, which is completely ridiculous, right? That means the second men's kingdom, let's call it men 2, and if you ask me, that's a kingdom that won't last very long. First, because there aren't many of them, and then after a while, they're going to have trouble reproducing. From a technological point of view, otherwise, our 2 kingdoms are about at the same level. For both, the first technologies have started to appear, but there aren't any major differences between the 2. And if you ask me, I think that from a technological point of view, it'll be about the same, except that the women seem to be more united because, well, with the men, there are still 2 kingdoms. And it's quite interesting because look, the men went from 90 to 99. I don't even understand how that's possible. If I look inside the kingdom stages, we went straight to 6 women. We have Gertrude and Loaf. They had 5 children and all 5 children are girls. I refuse to believe the game is random. I believe it considers the number of men in the kingdom, and if there are fewer women, it ensures the children are girls. I can't think of another reason. Anyway, I waited about 10 years to see what would happen. So now, we're at the 20th year, and there's still a very slight advantage for the women. 108 women versus 107 men. Honestly, I thought there would be a lot more women than men. It's sad. But honestly, a man can get several women pregnant, but not vice versa. But it's clear that on Gertrude's side, she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... Wait, I can't even count the number of children, actually. It's crazy. There are 11 people in Gertrude's family. Wow, yeah, no, really, they take war very seriously. On the women's side, they managed to get 4 men for 5 children. Honestly, that's actually a pretty good score. And especially, Jean-Charles' first children are reaching adulthood, so we might have a population boom. Actually, the way Worldbox works, I think, is that it tries to form couples between different members of the kingdoms. That means there's no situation where a man is in a relationship with like 5 women at the same time. This helps explain why there's no population explosion among women. But for now, nothing is certain. But the real question I'm asking myself is how the age pyramid will evolve. Here you can see that, for example, on the women's side, though I don't know why, there are 2 men who are 40 years old, but there are especially 95 women who are 40 years old. So normally, well, I don't know what the age limit is for having children in Worldbox, but it's going to be complicated. We have 2 men who are 20 years old, 3 women who are 10 years old. I think the 2 can balance each other out. Honestly, I think there will be a major decline in the population, especially among women and possibly men too. Even if there are a few more of them, they'll likely need to rebuild civilization from the ground up. Look, the men are starting to take a slight advantage. What I'm gonna do is let the simulation run until year 50. Okay, so already what we can see is that quite a few things have happened. Well, first it snowed a little, we can go skiing in the Pyrenees. But above all, contrary to what I thought, the kingdom of women is much larger than the kingdom of men. What's interesting already is that in terms of gender parity, we've gone from 1 man for every 100 women to 37 men for every 107 women. We're at about 30%, which isn't bad, honestly. We're starting to get closer to a certain balance. On the men's side, what does it look like? 87 27 men for 25 women. We're even closer to parity, if I'm not mistaken. And the specific thing on the men's side is that we have other kingdoms that have been formed. I don't know why, but even if we add up the population of these 3 kingdoms, we still don't reach the number of women. For now, I'd lean toward the women's kingdom, though it's not really that anymore since we're at 76 men to 117. The numbers are rising quickly. I think that in the game, there must be some kind of regulation mechanism that makes it so when there are too many women, men appear, and vice versa. Not very realistic, all of that, huh? Honestly. In the south, there are far more of us than in the north. If the natural barrier were gone, since they're not united, I think the women would overpower them. Interestingly, I think men have a slight advantage in maximum population, mainly because there are few mountain ranges in the north. That must be the Vosges. Maybe I'm just talking nonsense. There's a small part of the Alps, I don't know what that is, some mountains a bit in Brittany, but if you look at the women's side, in terms of plains that are really usable and where they can potentially build houses and fields, they have a lot less space, so their population growth can quickly be capped. It's pretty funny, I don't really know what they're doing there. Why are they all going here in this area? Is there something that interesting there? It looks like little ants going back and forth, and all in all, with all that, we've managed to reach the year 115. So, let's take a look at what the male-female distribution looks like. On the women's kingdom side, we have 173 men for 174 women, which means we're almost at equilibrium. That is, if I look at the families, there are no humans left from the beginning of humanity. It's sad, isn't it? For the men, I think it's going to be about the same in terms of balance. No, look, there are more women than men in the men's kingdom. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense anymore. So now there are 21 single women in the men's kingdom. What the fuck? Actually, it's pretty interesting to see how the different statistics have evolved. And what's funny too is that the other kingdoms that the men took over, they have very little demographic expansion. There might be a male-female imbalance. For instance, in the kingdom with 14 people, there are 5 men and 9 women. The north actually has many more women. And it's the same in the third men's kingdom. There are 10 men for 12 women. What the fuck? Well, let's just keep the simulation going. What's pretty interesting is that around the year 130, there were a lot of wars on the men's side. So much so that the male population decreased greatly. Well, male population, you know what I mean, right? Because now there are more women. But anyway, at this point, the north of France has 4 times fewer inhabitants than the south. Actually, I'm starting to think that in Worldbox, maybe they designed men to be more warlike. I don't see any other explanation. Honestly, it's not possible otherwise. So you might say, yeah, but why would they go to war if now there's a majority of women? It's actually pretty interesting because there must be a majority of women, right? But no, it's actually about equal. But actually, I feel like what explains why there are still so many wars is because in the early years, there were several cultures that formed. So it's kind of, but in the end, the one that won was actually the culture that was mainly male. So in the end, my theory doesn't work. Actually, my theory fails completely. Here, men's culture has a reputation of 1 showing its global recognition, while women's culture is at 0. Once again, women are invisible. It's just impossible. But in terms of technology, I think both cultures are equal in the end. I let 150 years go by and the difference only became more obvious. Well, sorry, but I don't know what's going on with the men, but they completely split up into a bunch of different kingdoms, and I don't even have an explanation related to different cultures since they all have the same culture. Maybe switching to the religion layer view will explain it. That's already pretty interesting. There are 2 different religions on the men's side, whereas on the women's side, it's really unified. That gives them a huge advantage in terms of their numbers, and if we look at the distribution, has it changed? We have about as many men as women. That means there are 5 fewer men. Interestingly, despite having 5 fewer men, there are 7 single women and 6 single men. This might be explained by the population pyramid. They really have a very nice population pyramid on the women's side, meaning that a large part of the population is in their 20s, and that means from a demographic expansion point of view, we should see further growth. On the men's side, it's a bit more of a mess. Sure, there's a small group in their 30s, but there are also a lot of older people. It's kind of like France, really. So, the thing I find a bit strange is that there's not much territorial expansion. As a result, the number of women isn't increasing, and my theory is that it's because they have less space to, well, they need more room. But then, why don't they expand over there? I might also have another explanation for why they're doing so well. It's that since there are mountains here, look, there are little gold nuggets scattered all over the mountain. There are a lot of minerals, a lot of resources that can be collected. So maybe from a wealth perspective, that explains a lot. They have 18,000 gold, and the men have 5,600. Based on these stats, wealth per person is still a bit higher among men, though that might not be true for all kingdoms. Because maybe this one, 2,700 gold for what, 35 people, it's not that bad, you know? Also, at the same time, they have a larger territory for fewer people, which allows them to exploit more resources per person. Just saying. I let it run until the year 500, and I have to admit, not much more happened. Except that the women took back a bit of territory in the west, and the men managed to catch up quite a bit. A little shout out to this men's kingdom, which only has one guy, who actually turns out to be a woman. They need to get together. At first, I wanted to remove the wall in year 500, but since neither women nor men have reclaimed all their territory, I'll give them 150 more years. That's just how I am. Generous. I couldn't explain why in this simulation things took so long, but we're just going to let things develop slowly. Well, it's year 650, and now the real stuff can finally begin. First, I'm going to rename all the men's kingdoms, and if we look more closely, we're not that far apart between the two kingdoms in terms of population. The men are around 400 and the women 420. So I think the men could win. The problem is, since they're split into several kingdoms, the women just have to attack the kingdoms one by one and they could win. Look, there's a sixth kingdom that just appeared. It's crazy. I don't know what's going on. The difference is really obvious. Okay, I'm going to pause and I'm going to replace the mountains with an ocean. If a kingdom wants to attack another, they'll need boats. That's already happening, with boats arriving and exchanges taking place between the two civilizations. Well, if I were the women, honestly, I'd start by attacking the smaller kingdoms first. Now, part of that red kingdom over there has already disappeared. By the way, that's the onset kingdom, I'm realizing. But it's crazy, there are way too many kingdoms. There are more men's kingdoms than there are French departments, just so you know. Well, maybe not, but what's interesting is that the women have already started to take over part of the men's territory, and what's really interesting is that they've gone to war against the men's territory that had the largest population. If they ever manage to capture that area, it's over for the men. But the men aren't giving up yet, because apparently some men are attacking the women directly on their own territory in the south. See how many troops are here. I don't know what they're doing there, but they're women. Vala is in the women's kingdom, that's for sure. They're all archers, and little by little, they're capturing territory from the main men's kingdom. So now, there are only 84 men left against 364 women. Yeah, I think this time we're looking at an almost total victory. Now, all this territory belongs to the women, and they have even more population than before. So, logically, they should attack the second biggest kingdom, but no, apparently they want to attack this small kingdom, Home Onset, which has only one person. And by the way, the person inside is still a woman. It's pretty funny, you know, because this kingdom has still held on, even though there are always like a maximum of 7 people inside. Well, I think that right now, the troops are gradually gathering at the border of the kingdom, and I think it's only a matter of minutes before it's taken over. And what's pretty funny is that it wasn't taken over by the women's kingdom, it was taken over by the kingdom of Man 4. So I think that's a bit annoying for the women, and they're gradually getting closer to the border. Although war hasn't been declared, I believe it's only a matter of time. The kingdom is vanishing right now. Though Man 4 took over, they have few troops, so I think they're just focusing here. The amount is really crazy, huh? What is this? Are those monkeys? But what the heck? Why are there monkeys here? It's a macaque, but there are just a huge number of them. Actually, I think it must have something to do with the biome. That might explain the population disparity. If the macaques are taking all the resources, maybe it's harder for the men to survive. If I look in the southern area, are there macaques there too? I don't really think so. And look, actually, there are 712 humans and 750 creatures, and I think the macaques are included in the creatures count. From there, I let the simulation run, because the women, even though they greatly outnumbered the men, weren't really in a hurry to overpower them. What's happening here? Look, the kingdom of men is at war with the kingdom of women. I don't think, in terms of strength, they're able to take back such a large area, and I think the women are going to counterattack, even though, honestly, they're struggling a little bit. Yeah, there are a lot of territories being taken back by the men, but at the same time, their population is dropping a lot, and there's still a huge number of macaques. Look at that, it's huge. So here, we have the territory of the men. What? No, Man 5 is taking back this whole area, and the women are also being attacked in their main area. They've taken back this whole area with the macaques. Are they going to counterattack? I think so. Yeah. There are still almost 500 of them, while Man 5 is just 115. Look, they're starting to take back territory. They're reclaiming their area and counterattacking, which weakens Man 5's territory. Interestingly, the women haven't split into 2 groups since the simulation began. Come on, are you finishing the job or not? The women now have 10 times the population of the other kingdoms combined and could finish it, especially since the others are weak. See? She's reclaiming territory. They've eliminated one of the last 2 kingdoms, and Men 5 only has 6 people left. Even if it's Brittany, they can't hold out much longer. Look, the troops are arriving, and as soon as they're there, boom, the territory is being taken back. So we're looking at a crushing victory for the women's team. Then again, I keep saying the women's team, but if you look at the breakdown, there are almost as many men as women. So the moral of the story is that the best kingdom is the one that's at 50-50. What a beautiful ending to the story. If you want more Worldbox episodes, hit like, subscribe, and the women's kingdom. Bye. This was Fuse. See you next time.